Bill Maher took to the airwaves to mock and question the social justice warriors, wondering what they actually care about. Let's watch.
Social justice warriors, for a lot of them it seems like it's more about the warrioring than about whatever the cause is. If you really cared about apartheid so much, which Israel does not actually practice, Arabs there vote, they serve in parliament, they sit on the judiciary, wouldn't you start with this? With the hundreds of millions of women in the world who live under a true apartheid, a gender apartheid of the most brutal kind? I'll wait.
Maher also honed in on the activists focused on this particular cause.
Maybe the question that today's protester needs to ask themselves more than any other is, why do I care so much about this particular cause? North Korea starves its people. China puts them in concentration camps. Myanmar brutalizes the Rohingya. Boko Haram kidnaps whole villages of women. The president of Burundi says gays should be stoned to death because they, quote, deserve it. Nothing? Ukraine? Maybe if these Google employees had the slightest idea what kind of fundamentalist, oppressive assholes they're supporting, Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, they might take it a little easier on the world's greatest monster, Genocide Joe. Genocide, by the way, is when you want to wipe out an entire people. That's the stated goal of Hamas. That's what from the river to the sea means. Hamas would do that to Israel, but can't. Israel could do that to them, but doesn't.
Now, here's another perspective from someone almost as erudite as Bill Maher, Columbia University professor Bruce Robin, talking to Fareed Zakaria on CNN. Let's listen.
I don't think that people think that Israel is a unique example of evil in the world. I think what's special about it is that it couldn't do what it's doing without the support of the United States. So students in the United States think we have a responsibility. It's not just somebody else. I mean, the United States is not supporting North Korea. It's not supporting Syria. There are a lot of bad places that are doing bad things that equal or worse, who knows, but they're not being supported by us. So we have a responsibility as Americans to do something about it. What's being done is being done in my name as an American and being done in my name as a Jew.
So, I mean, that is the most obvious and often repeated rejoinder to that very tired talking point of Bill Maher's. Why do you care about the thing that is frankly inconvenient for me that you care about? Because it's distasteful, because the videos and photographs of maimed and dismembered children and starving children, and entire families wiped out, and entire housing stocks wiped out, and every university wiped out, and all of these mosques and churches turned into rumble. It looks so bad. Why do you care about this? Why don't you look over here at some other tragedy in the world that doesn't implicate me and my biases? Well, the reason is quite plainly that unlike North Korea or any other of these regimes around the world that are criticized roundly, routinely, and frequently by many of the same movement actors that are upset about Palestine, our American tax dollars aren't funding the bad actor in those scenarios. And right now, not only does Israel receive more aid from the United States than any other country in the world, it's far from being the poorest country in the world or the neediest country in the world, but it receives more American aid than any other country in the world, and that has now been exacerbated since October 7th, where we are sending not just financial aid, not just defensive aid in terms of funding the Iron Dome, but weapons, and we're sending them hand over fist, and we know exactly how they're being used.
Yeah, look, I do agree that the whole why don't you care about this instead of this is a game that gets, frankly, annoying to me very quickly because, yes, there's always something else we can be. I mean, I get hit with that accusation myself all the time. Like, why do you care so much about free speech or protest? I don't know, that's just what I specialized in as a reporter. Sure. I have like a lot of colleagues at my magazine who talk about police brutality and foreign policy and all sorts of things, and my job was to pay attention to free speech culture, so like, lay off me, man, you know what I mean? So the whole kind of like, you could care about this instead of that, I get. And also, US policy is much more directly involved in what's happening for, you know, for better or for worse, depending on what your view of it is, in Israel than like, you know, just saying something about
what did
North
Biden
Korea,
say
which is famously as
Biden said
as it could possibly be.
if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to create it. that's how important Israel is to us. That's why we have a special relationship. We can't simultaneously say it's our greatest ally in the world. We have a special relationship. You have all of these New York senators, like the Richie Torreses of the world, saying things like, or who is it? Hakeem Jeffries saying Israel is the 6th borough of New York. Yeah. I mean, that's not what we're saying about North Korea.
I think it can be. I think there are cases where corporations or people will do their I'm boycotting X, Y, or Z thing over some. Okay, but you're not boycotting. Like, what's a good example of this? Oh, when I remember when Indiana passed some kind, under Governor Mike Pence at the time, passed some kind of religious freedom law that was gonna, it's one of those cake baking cases where maybe this wedding venue wouldn't have to feature a gay wedding or something like that, and so many people were like, liberals, supporters of gay marriage, were going to ban. There were celebrities who said we're not going to do concerts there, that kind of thing. And at the time, I was like, but gay marriage is actually still illegal in 13 states in the country, and you're not boycotting any of those states. Or like Disney, saying, I mean, this was part of the criticism of, maybe not specifically what DeSantis had, but of conservatives, your Disney's yelling about Ron DeSantis about the Don't Say Gay bill, but it still does cruises to island nations where it's sodomy is illegal and you can technically be executed for it. Those kinds of hypocrisies, I think, annoy a lot of people and can be criticized for good reason. I don't think this is quite that.
Yeah, but it's important to note that Bill Maher has been really, he's the focus of this clip, but this is a sentiment that is much more broadly being engaged with by a kind of liberal media class that doesn't really know what to do with these protests. Because remember, these student protests are reflecting a much broader national trend that supports, well outside of just young people, well outside of just students, an end to this war. People want an end to violence. These are fundamentally peace protests. And how do you argue against a peace protest? Well, you have to recharacterize them. So people like Nate Silver, he had a take that was getting dragged on the internet over the weekend. He said that he's asking this question again: why do people care? Why do people care? He says, most people don't form political opinions through deep examination of the issues or reasoning from first principles. It's more like picking some particular fashion label or a way of dressing.
You think that's wrong? I think that's absolutely correct.
Especially for younger people who face more peer pressure. No, it has been one of the biggest red lines, most dangerous red lines in America, as we're seeing from how the media is weaponizing, it's willing to end TikTok over too many pro-Palestine videos, to come out and be critical of Israel. And the fact that despite all of the media pointing in one direction, all of the red lines pointing in one direction, and that students have still, not just students, most Americans have come to the conclusion that the carnage that we're seeing coming out of Gaza, that almost, depending on your estimate, 13 to 17,000 children alone being killed, more children killed in a war zone than any other war in the last, I think, in modern history. The fact that you're seeing the level of destruction and that it's so disproportionate to the attacks, no matter how horrible, on October 7th, has led everyone to the conclusion that this has to stop now. Everyone except for Bibi Netanyahu, who's facing incredible protests back home in Israel, because Israelis do not feel like he is managing the situation in a way that's well geared to get the hostages back home, and his loyal vassal, Joe Biden.
Everyone but Netanyahu agrees that the carnage must end now under any circumstances. I think is a pretty exaggerated statement.
The majority of Americans believe that we need to have a ceasefire.
They would like to have a ceasefire. Yeah. Right, but then the devil ends up in the details.
Which Benjamin Netanyahu
Well, I would like to have a ceasefire either, but what does that involve?
But Benjamin Netanyahu won't support it. This is what I'm trying to say, Robby. Benjamin Netanyahu will not support a ceasefire because he doesn't want to have to end the violence in Gaza. That's
Hamas
his condition.
will Hamas actually abide by a ceasefire?
100%.
Or will it launch further attacks on Israel in the future?
We could
can there only be a ceasefire after the terrorist organization that perpetrated October 7th is killed or surrenders?
We could have had a ceasefire. All that horrible video of that American who had lost his arm in October 7th. We could have had a ceasefire, and that man could have been getting medical care.
How many people are going to lose their arms in the next attack? that Hamas has vowed to keep doing this. So
Well,
again,
Robby,
ceasefire. I support a ceasefire in that I think both sides should stop killing each other, but they don't want to. So what can I do?
How many people lost their limbs in the March of Return in 2018 when Israeli snipers stood on the top of the dividing wall and shot men, women, and children intentionally in their limbs so that they would be paralyzed and maimed for the rest of their life? This is a conversation that extends, as we know, far beyond October 7th. So the question is, why do people care? People care because they have hearts, they have humanity, and when they see violence happen, whether it's against Israelis or against Palestinians, they want it to stop. And I think there's a deeper conversation now happening about the root causes of the conflict that Americans
just wanting it to stop is not a policy preference.
That Americans like Bill Maher don't want to have, because this is another part of the clip I think we didn't touch on. He used to be a guy that was so critical of theocracy. I think it's fair to say that the man is an Islamophobe. I will own that. That's my subjective opinion. But the way that he will explicitly say that he thinks Islam is a particularly violent religion, that it's a bad religion as compared to other religions, that it results in more harm against other people than other religions, and he squarely places the blame on the religion itself. And you can see the trend emerging in the way that he focused on the kinds of harms in the world that he thinks that American college kids should be focused on. Wait a minute, I'm in the middle of this point. But when it comes to Israel, an ethno-state that is defined by having a religious majority of Jewish people, that's part of why they cannot allow Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank to have full democratic participatory rights in a single state of Israel, why there's a rejection of a one-state solution, right? Because then you would no longer have a Jewish majority. Suddenly he's super enthusiastic about an ethno-state or a theocracy, which is the name, I'm using that word because it was the name of his film in which he was so critical of religious intolerance. So I do think if you go and watch the totality of the professor's discourse with Fareed Zakaria, he goes on to make that exact point. And that professor happens to be Jewish. And he says that it's an American principle. It's an American bedrock principle to want pluralities, racial pluralities, religious pluralities, to think that that is a good idea. It's why people came to America to escape the kind of dogma that existed in England and other places that Americans fled from. And so for now, the entire country to be lining up behind this idea that we can't have a one-state solution because we have to preserve this religious majority, and to be re-engaging with some of this post-9/11 kind of, oh my God, Sharia is coming for us all, Islam is a unique scourge, discourse feels incredibly regressive. And I'm sorry, Bill Maher is wildly out of touch with where most Americans are.
I feel like
he even had to tell people to clap. Did you hear that?
He has mocked. I do not dispute that he has made fun of Islam a lot. He's also widely mocked and made fun of Christianity, Catholics. He's been denounced by Catholic authorities over and over again. He is a self-proclaimed atheist who mocks religion, pretty across the board in my view. But there it is.
One other point on this is that, along with Nate Silver, I couldn't pull it up just now, but there is an article, I think it's in the Post, where someone there's a new piece that's arguing that the kids are rioting, the kids are protesting, the real reason they're upset is because they're not getting enough sex. People are inside too much. I saw that
New York Post headline.
Yeah, so.
Or not in.
Excuse me?
Nothing.
We'll talk about it during the break.
Okay.
But it's a kind of bizarre coping. Everyone's trying to come up with every excuse in the world why the kids could be mad, except for the reasons that they're saying out loud, which is that their government and in their universities in particular are investing in weapons manufacture that is enabling what the ICJ has described as plausibly a genocide.
I don't know about that they're not getting enough sex, but I have seen articles, yes, from Nate Silver, some polling from David Shore. Matt Iglesias has a post on this, trying to say that young people's most important issues to young people are the same as everybody else, which is inflation, healthcare, et cetera. Maybe we can get one of those experts or someone like them to argue about it with you/us later in the show this week. We'll have more Rising right after this.